An 11-year-old poured his heart into an essay about his Navy SEAL father. The teacher didn't applaud. She mocked him, called his dad a killer, said real heroes don't need weapons. But the next day, real heroes showed up anyway. 6 men in dress blues, one mission: to remind a school and a nation that courage wears many forms. And some uniforms don't just protect lives, they protect legacies. The essay was simple enough. Write about your hero and explain why they inspire you. For most kids in Mrs. Henderson's 5th grade class, it meant copying something about a celebrity or athlete from the internet. But for 11-year-old Marcus Thompson, sitting in the back row with his worn-out sneakers and hand-me-down clothes, the answer was obvious. His father, Petty Officer First Class David Thompson, Navy SEAL Team 3, 3 deployments, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, and currently serving his 4th tour somewhere Marcus wasn't allowed to know about. Marcus had been working on the essay for weeks, staying up late by the light of his phone, carefully crafting each sentence about why his dad was his hero, not because he was famous, but because he carried wounded soldiers to safety, because he called home every chance he got, even when the connection was terrible, because he sent letters that smelled like desert sand and hope. "Remember, class," Mrs. Henderson announced, tapping her manicured nails on the desk, "these presentations are worth 30% of your grade. I expect effort, not excuses." Marcus shifted in his seat, clutching his handwritten pages. No fancy poster board like the other kids, no colorful printouts, just his words, honest and raw, about a man who meant everything to him. "Marcus Thompson, you're up," Mrs. Henderson called, barely looking up from her phone. Marcus walked to the front of the class, his heart hammering. He'd practiced this speech in the mirror 100 times, but standing here, with 20 pairs of eyes staring at him, felt different. "My hero is my dad, Petty Officer First Class David Thompson," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "He's a Navy SEAL, and he's deployed right now, somewhere I can't talk about because it's classified." A few kids snickered. Marcus ignored them. "My dad has saved lives. He's carried wounded soldiers out of danger when everyone else was running the other way. He's been shot at, bombed, and he's still out there fighting so we can be safe here at home." Mrs. Henderson looked up from her phone, eyebrows raised with what looked like barely contained amusement. "He sends me letters when he can," Marcus continued, pulling out a worn envelope from his pocket. "This one came last week. He says he thinks about me and Mom every day, and that he's proud of me for taking care of things at home while he's gone." The room was quiet now. Even the class clowns had stopped fidgeting. "That's why he's my hero. Not because he's famous or rich, but because he sacrifices everything for people he doesn't even know. He's brave when everyone else is scared. And he never gives up, no matter how hard things get." Marcus folded his papers, started to walk back to his seat. He'd done it. He'd shared his truth, his pride, his heart. Then Mrs. Henderson started clapping, slowly, sarcastically. "Well, well, well," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Wasn't that just touching?" Marcus stopped mid-step, confusion flickering across his face. A few kids shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Tell me, Marcus," she continued, standing up from her desk, "when exactly did we start calling professional killers heroes?" The room went dead silent. You could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I don't understand," Marcus whispered. "Oh, I think you do." Mrs. Henderson walked around her desk, arms crossed. "Your father gets paid to go to other countries and shoot people. That's not heroism, that's just, well, it's just a job, and not a very admirable one." Marcus felt like he'd been punched in the stomach, but he saves people. He protects American interests," she interrupted. "There's a difference. Real heroes are teachers, doctors, social workers, people who actually help society instead of perpetuating violence." A girl in the front row, Sarah, raised her hand tentatively. "Mrs. Henderson, my uncle is a soldier, and he—" "Not now, Sarah," Mrs. Henderson snapped. "We're having a teachable moment here." She turned back to Marcus, who was standing frozen in the middle of the classroom, his face burning with humiliation and confusion. "The truth is, Marcus, your father chose an easy path. Point a gun, follow orders, collect a paycheck. Real courage is standing up for what's right without violence. Real heroes don't need weapons." Marcus's vision blurred. The words hit him like physical blows. Easy path, his dad who'd been away for more birthdays than he'd been home for. Who had scars on his back from shrapnel? Who woke up screaming from nightmares he never talked about? "My dad isn't a killer," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He's a protector." "Is he?" Mrs. Henderson's voice was clinical, detached. "Because from where I sit, it looks like he abandoned his family to go play soldier in someone else's country. If he really cared about protecting people, he'd be here, protecting you and your mother." That did it. Marcus felt the tears coming, hot and unstoppable. In front of everyone, in front of kids who already whispered about his second-hand clothes and free lunch tickets. "He didn't abandon us," Marcus choked out. "He's serving our country." "He's serving his own ego," Mrs. Henderson replied coldly. "And leaving his child to make excuses for him. That's not heroism, Marcus. That's selfishness." The classroom was a tomb. 20 kids sat in stunned silence, watching their teacher systematically destroy one of their classmates. Some looked away. Others stared in morbid fascination. None of them said a word. Marcus ran, not to his seat but straight out the door, his essay pages scattering behind him like fallen leaves. Marcus didn't stop running until he reached the empty auditorium. He collapsed into a seat in the back row, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Everything Mrs. Henderson had said echoed in his head, mixing with his own worst fears. What if she was right? What if his dad really had chosen to leave them? What if everything Marcus believed about honor and sacrifice was just a lie he'd told himself to feel better about being abandoned? He pulled out his phone with trembling fingers and scrolled to the last text from his dad. "Proud of you every day, son. Can't wait to hear about your presentation. Love you to the moon and back." The message was from 3 days ago. His dad had been thinking about this presentation, had been excited to hear about it. Marcus buried his face in his hands and cried harder. Meanwhile, back in the classroom, an uncomfortable silence had settled over the room. Mrs. Henderson returned to her desk as if nothing had happened, but several students were openly staring at her. "Well," she said briskly, "I think we all learned something important today about critical thinking and not blindly accepting narratives about so-called heroes. Sarah, you're up next." But Sarah didn't move. She sat frozen in her seat, looking at the empty chair where Marcus had been sitting. "Sarah?" Mrs. Henderson's voice sharpened. "Your presentation?" I don't think I want to go today," Sarah whispered. "Excuse me?" "I said I don't want to present today." Sarah's voice was stronger now. "What you did to Marcus was wrong." Mrs. Henderson's eyes narrowed. "Miss Rodriguez, you'll present when I tell you to present, and you'll keep your opinions about my teaching methods to yourself." But the damage was done. The spell was broken. And in the back corner of the room, a quiet kid named Jake was already pulling out his phone. Jake Martinez wasn't the type to cause trouble. He was the kid who sat in the back, did his homework, and minded his own business. But he'd seen what happened to Marcus, and something inside him had snapped. His phone had been recording the whole time, propped up in his open textbook. He'd started recording for a different reason, to help him study Mrs. Henderson's lessons later. But he'd captured something else entirely, the whole thing. Every cruel word, every calculated blow to an 11-year-old sense of identity and pride. During lunch, Jake found Marcus in the library, still red-eyed and quiet. "Hey," Jake said, sliding into the chair across from him. "You okay?" Marcus shrugged. "Been better." "What she said, it was wrong. You know that, right?" Marcus looked up. "Was it? I mean, what if my dad really is just—" "Stop." Jake's voice was firm. "My older brother is in the army. He's not a killer. He's not selfish. And neither is your dad." Jake pulled out his phone, showed Marcus the recording. "She said all that stuff in front of the whole class. That's not teaching. That's bullying." Marcus stared at the screen. "What are you going to do with that?" "I'm going to make sure people know what really happened here today." By evening, the video was everywhere. Jake had posted it on TikTok, Instagram, and sent it to every local news station he could find. The hashtag #justice for Marcus was trending within hours. The video was devastating. A teacher systematically humiliating a child for honoring his deployed father, calling military service selfish, mocking a Purple Heart recipient as a professional killer. Comments poured in from around the country. "This is disgusting. That teacher should be fired immediately. My husband died serving this country. How dare she? That poor kid. Someone needs to stand up for him. Where's the principal? Where's the superintendent?" The video reached military communities, veteran groups, and Gold Star families. It reached active duty service members deployed overseas. It reached people who remembered what it felt like to be 11 years old and having your hero torn down by an adult who was supposed to protect you. Marcus went to bed that night not knowing his story was spreading across the internet like wildfire. He went to bed thinking he was alone, humiliated, and maybe even wrong about everything he'd believed about his father. He had no idea that hundreds of thousands of people were rallying to his defense. He had no idea that his story had reached some very important people. And he had no idea that his father's commanding officer had just received a very interesting phone call. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell was reviewing deployment schedules when her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but the voice on the other end was one she knew well. "Sarah, this is Admiral Morrison. I need you to pull Petty Officer Thompson from his current assignment immediately." "Sir, is everything all right? Has something happened to his family?" His son has been publicly humiliated by a teacher who called his father a professional killer and suggested military service is selfish. The incident was recorded and is currently viral on social media. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell felt her blood pressure spike. "Sir, I'll need to see the video to understand the full..." "I'm sending it to you now. Watch it. Then get Thompson on a secure line. His unit is being reassigned to a training exercise stateside. They'll be wheels up in 6 hours. The line went dead. Mitchell stared at her phone, then opened the video link Admiral Morrison had sent. By the time she finished watching, her hands were shaking with rage. She picked up her secure phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. "SEAL Team 3, this is Lieutenant Commander Mitchell. I need to speak with Petty Officer Thompson immediately and tell him to pack his bags. He's coming home." Marcus woke up to his phone buzzing with notifications. Hundreds of them, messages from strangers, comments on videos he hadn't posted, friend requests from people he'd never met. His mom was in the kitchen, coffee mug in hand, laptop open, reading something that made her smile and cry at the same time. "Mom? What's happening?" She looked up, and for the first time in weeks, she looked hopeful. "Honey, sit down. There's something you need to know." She showed him the video Jake had posted, showed him the comments, the shares, the outpouring of support from across the country. "People are angry, Marcus. Not at you, at her, at what she did to you." Marcus read comment after comment, veterans sharing their own stories, military families offering support, teachers apologizing on behalf of their profession. "There's something else," his mom said softly. "Your father called this morning. He's coming home." "Home? But his deployment isn't over for 3 months. His commanding officer is sending the entire unit back for a training exercise. They'll be here tonight." Marcus felt something loosen in his chest, something that had been tight and painful since yesterday afternoon. He's really coming home? He's really coming home. And Marcus, he's proud of you. He's proud of your presentation, proud of how you stood up for him, proud of who you are. For the first time in 24 hours, Marcus smiled. The black SUVs arrived at Riverside Elementary at 8:15 a.m., just as the morning bell was ringing. They parked in a neat line in the visitor spaces, engines idling, windows tinted dark. Inside the school, morning announcements were just finishing when the office door opened. The secretary looked up to see 6 men in navy dress blues standing in the doorway. They weren't loud, they weren't aggressive. They were simply present in the way that only military personnel can be, with quiet authority that fills a room without saying a word. "We're here to see Principal Davies," the lead officer said politely, "regarding the incident involving Petty Officer Thompson's son." The secretary's eyes widened. She'd spent the morning fielding angry phone calls about the viral video. She knew exactly who these men were. I'll get him immediately. Principal Davies emerged from his office looking harried and nervous. He'd been expecting this conversation, but not with 6 Navy SEALs standing in his front office. "Gentlemen," he said, trying to maintain composure, "I assume you're here about the incident yesterday." "Yes, sir," the lead officer replied. "I'm Lieutenant Commander Mitchell. This is Petty Officer Thompson, and these are members of his unit. We're here to address what happened to his son." Standing slightly behind the others, David Thompson looked exactly like what he was, a man who had rushed home to protect his child. His dress uniform was pristine, his posture military perfect, but his eyes held the barely contained emotion of a father who had heard his son crying on the phone. "Of course," Davies said quickly. "We can discuss this in my office. Mrs. Henderson has been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation." "That's a start," Lieutenant Commander Mitchell said. "But we're not here to discuss discipline. We're here to make sure this never happens again." Word spread through the school like electricity. Navy SEALs were in the building. They were here because of what happened to Marcus. They were here because someone had finally stood up for him. By the time the officers reached Mrs. Henderson's classroom, now being covered by a substitute, students were peeking out of doorways, teachers were whispering in hallways, and the entire school felt charged with anticipation. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell knocked on the classroom door. "Excuse me, may we come in?" The substitute teacher, a young woman named Miss Parker, nodded wordlessly. The 6 officers entered in formation, their presence transforming the ordinary classroom into something extraordinary. "Students," Lieutenant Commander Mitchell said, her voice carrying easily through the room, "we're here because we heard about what happened to one of your classmates yesterday. We're here to make sure you understand something important." She gestured to Petty Officer Thompson, who stepped forward. "This is Petty Officer First Class David Thompson. He's a Navy SEAL. He's also Marcus's father, and he's a hero." The room was dead silent. Every student was riveted. "Marcus stood up here yesterday and told you about his father's service. He told you about sacrifice, about courage, about protecting others. Everything he said was true." Another officer stepped forward. "Service members don't serve for glory. They don't serve for money. They serve because they believe in something bigger than themselves. They serve to protect the freedoms that allow you to sit in this classroom, to speak your minds, to pursue your dreams." Petty Officer Thompson's voice was quiet, but it carried weight. "My son was humiliated for honoring military service, for being proud of his father. That should never happen. Not in America, not anywhere." A hand shot up. Sarah, the girl who had defended Marcus yesterday. "Sir, is Marcus okay?" Thompson smiled for the first time since entering the building. "He's going to be fine. He's strong like his mother, and he's got good friends who stand up for him." He looked directly at Jake, who was recording again, but this time with permission. "Sometimes adults make mistakes. Sometimes they forget that words have power, especially when they're spoken by someone in authority. But that doesn't mean we stop believing in what's right." The video of the Navy SEALs visit spread even faster than the original incident. Within hours, it had millions of views. The image of 6 decorated service members standing in a 5th-grade classroom defending a child's right to honor his father became a symbol of something larger. Mrs. Henderson's resignation was accepted that afternoon. The school board issued a formal apology. The district implemented new policies about respecting military families and understanding the sacrifices of service members. But the real victory wasn't institutional, it was personal. Marcus returned to school the next day with his head held high. His father was back for 2 weeks of training exercises that happened to be scheduled right in their hometown. His classmates looked at him differently now, not as the quiet kid with the absent father, but as someone who had stood up for what he believed in. Jake's original video was replaced in the news cycle by images of reunion. Marcus running into his father's arms in the school parking lot, military families sharing their own stories of sacrifice and service, teachers around the country posting videos of their own lessons about honoring veterans. The essay Marcus had written, the one that had started everything, was eventually read aloud on national television by a Gold Star mother who said it reminded her why her son's service mattered. But Marcus didn't need the national attention to know his father was a hero. He'd always known that. What he learned was that when you speak the truth, Even when it's hard, even when people try to tear you down, there are others who will stand up with you. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they'll show up in dress blues with the quiet authority of those who have earned the right to speak for honor, sacrifice, and the true meaning of service. Mrs. Henderson was wrong about one thing. Heroes don't need weapons, but they do need courage. And on the day Marcus Thompson stood in front of his class and spoke his truth about his father, he proved that courage isn't something you're born with. It's something you choose, again and again, even when you're 11 years old and your voice is shaking and the whole world seems to be against you, especially then. If you believe no child should ever be ashamed of their parents' service, if you believe teachers should build students up instead of tearing them down, and if you believe that honor is earned through sacrifice, not speeches, then share this story. Because somewhere tonight, there's another military kid who needs to know that their parents' service matters, that their sacrifice is seen, and that they're not alone. The uniform may come off, but the honor never does.